Hello, beautiful friends. I'm Mariquita Solis, the live stream host for all-creatures.org. All-creatures.org was founded in 1998. It's the leading resource for faith-based animal rights veganism. Led by our executive director, Tams Nicholson, we provide free resources for people seeking to live compassionately towards all creatures. Our extensive library includes vegan sermons and commentaries, animal rights strategies, action alerts, events, and works by various vegan authors. We also sponsor websites for animal rights organizations. Our mission is to unite compassionate individuals worldwide who honor the dignity of all creatures. Today, I'm excited to welcome Emilia Leese. Emmy is an author, rewilder, podcast host, public speaker, and magazine editor. She also develops life skills and ethics workshops for underserved youth. Emmy was a corporate finance lawyer for over 20 years. She and her husband, Roger, who is also vegan, live in London in the Highlands. Follow her work at emilialeese.com, Substack, and at the award-winning birchfieldhighlands.org. Her Think Like a Vegan podcast is streaming on all platforms and on YouTube. So, welcome, Emmy. Let me get this background off. It's very distracting.
It's good to be here, Mariquita. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I'm excited to have you on here. I met you through Climate Healers as you were their guest, and we had a nice conversation. And then you presented for them, and the topic was rewilding planet Earth. And so you are an amazing force in rewilding and many other things. So yes, I'm glad to extend this to our guests on all-creatures.org and all these beautiful guests that are here. I see Deb and Philip and JJ. Thanks for joining. Let us know where you're joining from, and let us know if you have questions and comments for Emmy. At the end, we will address those. So, Emmy, tell us when did you become a vegan, and what led you to make that transition?
So I became vegan in 2013. And really it was through the realization of what dairy involves. And I really couldn't believe I didn't understand that, even though it's so basic. It had never occurred to me. So as soon as it did occur to me, and as soon as I realized what that entailed, I was like, well, that's it. No more. Done. And really that was it. It was all I needed to know.
Yeah. I mean, it is very powerful when you realize what goes on in the dairy industry, and if you've been an animal lover your whole life and then you realize that, I mean, that can really quickly shift lifestyle.
So. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I was like, oh, wait a second. Oh my God. Well, like here I am. I was like in my 40s and I'm like, this is basic biology. How did I, miss it? But there we are. So, thankfully I had the realization, and thankfully that I did something about it. One of those things, like once you do better.
Right. Yeah. It's always, change is beautiful.
Exactly.
It's never too late to change. So, so when you did go vegan, did you have supports with your friends and family, or did you feel like you were alone?
That's interesting. That's an interesting question. So, it was not. I mean, I didn't have any vegan friends, but then I made vegan friends. So I'm very fortunate in that respect, that I have built a really lovely in-person and also an internet community. So I'm very fortunate in that respect. And Roger, he went vegan. He became vegan not too long after I did, maybe about a year. And there were heated discussions and conversations about that, and he understood it. It was a fundamental, critical, ethical point between us, that was important. So he took it seriously, and so I'm also very fortunate in that respect. Um, in terms of family, no, my family is not vegan, but they live in the U.S. I live in the U.K. So there isn't that sort of conflict that I know a lot of people um, deal with often. Um, so not that it would be a conflict, but that tension. Um, I don't have to come up against it that often. So in that way, um, that's pretty good. Um,
Yeah.
in that way.
And did you grow up in the U.S.?
Yeah, so I grew up in Italy and in the U.S. I moved to the U.S. when I was an adolescent, essentially, and so I've sort of, have spent my life in a few different countries. But when I did live in the U.S., I lived on the East Coast.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah, and I've been here in Britain now for over, oh my gosh, a long time, decades.
Yeah, it's nice. I can only imagine. And you live in the Highlands. Um, and
Yeah,
what is that like? That seems very mysterious to me. The Highlands, I imagine, the moors and then the foggy regions and beautiful cows that have all that fur. What are those furry cows called?
yeah,
I'm
they're the Highland cows.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, that was totally happenstance. When I met Roger, um, he had bought this really dilapidated farmhouse up there. And so we restored it together over time, and that's how I ended up there. And now we have a rewilding project there, so we spend a lot more time there. I did not expect that life would take me up that far north, but yeah, it's a really beautiful place. And just so you said, it is. It's like those big sort of the moors and the hills, and sometimes there's fog, sometimes there's, well, 4 seasons in one day. That's also a normal occurrence, and even in summer. And but it's really beautiful, but it's really up north. Sometimes we get the northern lights up there, which is really cool, which I've gotten to see once or twice, which I always wanted to, and I couldn't believe it.
That's amazing. I would love to see them. I've never seen them, but you never know. I mean, if you ended up there, who knows where I'm going to end up in the next 10 years? So you
You
never
just, life is weird. Life is weird.
It definitely is. So, well, how does the peace of not eating creatures manifest in your life today, Emmy?
Um, that's also a very interesting question and really interesting put. Um, I guess in a way, I think about it in the sense that it's something that I don't participate in, and that gives me a certain amount of being centered, and grounded in a holistic way. Like it aligns with everything that I believe in and how I conduct my life. So that all works together. Um, and and it's funny. I was talking with somebody else, and they said, it's a big responsibility too. And I thought it was a really interesting comment that he made. Being vegan is a big responsibility too, because in some ways you are, um, because you stand out still to some degree. I mean, more people are becoming vegan, and more people know the word and understand the concept and so forth. But still, I think that it does challenge you to be even a little bit better if you can, not that we can be all of the time, but it maybe to be a little bit more patient, or to be a little bit more, I don't know, like it just to be a little bit um, more willing to discuss certain things, maybe in trying it in different ways. So that's what I always try to go back to. I always try to go back to thinking like, okay, I'm in this spot. I've done, I've done the right thing, and how do I then communicate that in the best possible way? And I try to use that. So the peace is more something that propels me forward to keep doing the work.
Yeah, and it sounds like you realize you're growing as you do it. You're always growing on the veganism because
Totally.
yeah, yeah, because there's always that like, are you vegan enough? Vegan is I think vegan is a journey, of course. I mean, micromanaging veganism is something I don't want to have as my job.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what that would be like, but
But when we all do the best we can, and then we just keep growing and more awareness and awareness in how to speak to people and how to get the message across is very important, right?
definitely, definitely.
And so, what if you had a young person come up to you and wanted help? I mean, that might be struggling with sadness, and they just turned vegan and they don't know what to do. They say, "My family's not listening to me. People are laughing at me." What would you?
Mm.
What words of encouragement would you give to them?
Um, Another good question. I think the you know sort of decentering yourself, acknowledging that it can be hard, especially in the beginning, and acknowledging the feelings and the emotions, but also trying to distance yourself, or to compartmentalize the emotions a little bit, because that allows you a little bit of clarity. Um, as long as you are okay, like our position as people in this, a lot of times we are okay in comparison to what the animals are suffering. We're fine, um, with great caveats around those words, as we're fine, uh, very big ones. And I totally understand the family thing. Family can be like the hardest nut to crack, and I would suggest don't. Just make your boundaries as clear as possible. Read as much as possible. Listen to podcasts. Listen to videos of how to understand veganism, where it comes from, and what it is ethically as a philosophy. Um, and then look for people who are interested in change, people who are interested in talking to you, even if they might never become vegan, but who are interested in having the conversation, or interested, or thoughtful, in the sense of, like, if you're at their house, they will make sure that there's a vegan meal for everyone, not just for you. Like things like that. Look for those people, and look for opportunities that suit you, both in terms of your character, your what you like to do, and that sort of thing, and less focus on the negative. Focus on the things that you can do and move forward with. That's basically how I see it.
No, I like that. I like it that you're suggesting that they take it in their hands, not wait for someone to come. You go out there and you look for the people. You go out there and, take action to help yourself. So that's very important. Now,
Yeah, I mean, to the extent it's not easy, and some people may be better at it than others. I'm not saying that that is the cure all, but in whatever small way that you can tailor for yourself, um, that's the best any of us can do, really.
right. Yeah. I mean, self care, self advocacy, right. And being aware,
Hmm.
starting off the day with, I'm going to be an advocate for myself. But when we're advocate for ourselves to live in peace and kindness, then we're advocates for the whole world to live in peace and kindness.
That's true.
So, now, before we got on here, I noticed that people were really looking forward to our conversation, and, and I was going to say you've compiled a big following. People know who you are. with your new book, which is Think Like a Vegan. And so tell us about that. I mean, tell us about your book, and then we'll talk about the rewilding.
Yeah. So actually, I because it's right here.
Good.
So this is the book. This is the paperback edition, which is going to be released in the U.S. on the 1st of April. And this one here, that's the hardcover, and that came out during the height of lockdown, um, which was interesting. And so I'm delighted that there's a paperback, and the paperback contains a whole new chapter at the end. So it's an afterwards that updates a variety of sections in the from the hardcover, and there's also some additional thoughts. There's a whole lot of new material in there, um, and and it's available anywhere. You can pre-order it from your favorite bookshop or online or whatever it is, wherever it is that you like to buy books, and or your library, obviously. And also, it's on audiobook. And the book is more of a I like to think of it as a tool. So it's accessible, and it talks about veganism from both. It kind of goes through a buildup. It goes from the basics of what veganism is, and what does then that look like in our everyday life. So, what does it look like in terms of economics? What does it look like in terms of how we relate to one another? What does it look like in terms of class? And there's of course also what does it look like in terms of health? But always try to come at it from an angle that's not the usual angle that we see. Like, yes, there's a section that you can just go through and say, oh, these are all the big organizations that say in terms of health, veganism is it's a perfectly fine diet and so forth. You can find those very easily. So each chapter is structured so that you can pop in, pop out, or read the whole thing cover to cover, of course. And that way you can use it in your own life, and however, when you're stuck in some, situation where you're not really sure how to think through something, it helps with that. And in fact, by the end, the last chapter is it's a bunch of scenarios. They're actually real. They're real scenarios with made up names. That the scenarios either are I have witnessed them, have been told to me, I overheard them, or saw them online. They're all real, and so we set them out, and then underneath there's a little box that says, well, there's a couple of questions like, what are the issues here? How would you resolve it? That sort of thing. Is this qualitatively different than that? It's kind of like that, like a workbook. And then I offer, a way to look at it, but you can sort of cover that up and decide, go through the process yourself, and then see what I suggest, and see if that works for you. And if not, think about why, or if you disagree, that's completely fine. But it's at least it offers sort of a guided way to think through various situations.
And that's very needed. This seems like it's a very introspective, thought-provoking book. I mean, really kind of like I don't like the word self-help, but um, really taking a second, really taking a mindful look at your thoughts and the way that
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like it really is a tool, and the way that it's structured, it's also it's more of a conversation rather than like a textbook where it's where it gets too complicated. I mean, there's plenty of complexity built in, but I tried to do so in a very sort of straightforward way. And then if you want to get more details, there's plenty of footnotes that you can follow, and you can then, learn tons more on your own time.
Right. Well, this sounds like perfect for any for vegans at any stage, but especially new vegans that might be confused
Yeah,
about everything.
yeah. It's for vegans for sure, and it's also for non-vegans. I've had a lot of non-vegans read the book
Hmm.
and say to me, you know what? I take veganism seriously now. And they may not have become vegan, but I mean, that is what it is. You can't change someone's, you can't unscrew their head and put new information in. Um, but they're taking it seriously. That's a really interesting thing to say.
Well,
Um,
that's a great accomplishment.
so yeah. So I find that really interesting when people tell me that.
Well, that's definitely good to hear. So, what's been your greatest accomplishment? Would you say or proudest moment as an author or in your professional life?
Hmm. I don't know. To be perfectly honest, I really don't know. Um, I, I never think of things like in that way. I don't know why. I just sort of do things, and then they are what they are. Um, I can tell you one of my happiest moments ever. That, of course, meeting my husband, getting married to him, whatever, all of that jazz. Uh, is this a few months ago? We were we were somewhere traveling, and we were swimming in a lake, and a capybara swam in with us, and then the capybara. She like when we were done swimming, she came out, and then I walked her back to because she was a rescue capybara who lived in this area where we were staying, and then I walked her back, and yeah, she was lovely,
Gosh,
and that was just the best. And she was like hanging out and letting me hold her hands, and while she was like floating around, and that's what she wanted. I honestly, like, that was amazing.
yeah, that is.
So I'll tell you that.
I love that because I volunteer at the Nature Center over here in the Atlanta area, and we have a beaver, and I always ask them about, the largest rodent.
Yeah.
We talk about the capybara, and so that's very exciting. I would love to see one.
Yeah, they're really amazing. They're really amazing.
Well, I could see why that would be a very amazing moment,
Yeah,
that you would never forget. So,
yeah.
yeah. So tell us about rewilding and why that is so important, and how much of the planet do we have left that's natural? I mean, it's not
Yeah.
industrial.
Um, so we got involved in rewilding in 2017. Um, we were really inspired to do so by someone who has been doing rewilding for the last 40 or now it must be about 50 years up in the Highlands. His name is Alan Watson Featherstone.
You and Roger.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he gave a talk, and after the talk, Roger was like, "Why don't we do something like that?" And I was like, "Okay, why not? I guess." um, and so rewilding basically tries to restore an ecosystem in the most hands-off way possible, to the extent that's possible, to be hands-off. You're hands-off, and you let an ecosystem return to its natural functional state. And then you only help out where it's necessary. So, for example, we don't have certain trees, but they should be there. Like, for example, oak. We don't have any oak trees. because they were cut down many, hundreds of years ago. And there aren't any oak trees around us, so it's not like we would get some acorns that would fall onto the land and then would eventually come out. So we have to plant some oak trees, and that sort of thing, without getting too much into the detail. And rewilding is really important because it restores. It attracts biodiversity, and biodiversity isn't just nice because it's nice to look at and it's a wonderful thing to have, but we need it. If we don't have biodiversity, the entire ecosystems will eventually collapse. You can't have a world that's just based on monoculture of plants, or monocultures of only some animals and not others, and you don't have the variety of natural systems that you need to have a functioning planet, essentially. And I mean, everybody here knows how much land that we use for, we've got we already use over half the land, over half of the habitable land is used for farming, and 3/4 of that is used for animal farming. And that has huge negative effects on biodiversity, as well as soil degradation, pollution of waterways and bodies of water like the ocean. If we could sort of, all of us, set aside land that we don't farm, that obviously we don't farm, we don't have any animal agriculture, we could actually have a lot more biodiversity. You could have a reversal of lots of negative effects that are happening, and you know biodiversity is also a carbon sink in a variety of ways. When you have a functioning ecosystem, that itself traps greenhouse gases, because that's the way that this world actually works. So encouraging people to rewild, whether they're rewilding their gardens, lots of people live in places where there are gardens, or where there's community gardens, and to have a bit, to pay a bit more attention to making a space more wild is really beneficial. Um, you know, if you have a garden and you sort of stop mowing the lawn, and you leave spaces that are just a bit more wild, you create space for birds, you create space for insects, you create space possibly for amphibians, depending on where you live. And that's a hugely beneficial thing. If we were to all do that, I mean, obviously you need it on a systemic level globally, and that's a separate conversation. But there's also things that we can do to contribute to that. And to show the benefits of that is one of the things that we try to do through our project at Birchfield.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I hear people saying that now that to have cattle farming and to raise cattle on the land, talking about sustainable. Why is that not sustainable?
Yeah, are you talking about regenerative farming, that sort of thing, and regenerative animal agriculture? Yeah. The idea of that essentially comes from the notion that in forests and in a variety of different ecosystems, like even on plains and grasslands, there have always been large herbivores wandering around. What do large herbivores do? They, with their hooves and so forth, they sort of churn up the earth so that you aerate it and the seeds are able to disperse and all that. All that is absolutely true. You do need large herbivores in their natural state. What you don't need is a bunch of large herbivores that are confined to one specific piece of land, and that, I mean, this is aside from their being objectified, obviously, um, because that is the ethical aspect of it, which is a non-starter as far as I'm concerned. Um, you still have to feed them. You still have to get the generally animal feed is soya. So the soya generally now, most of it comes from Brazil, and you still have deforestation in Brazil because of the soya production that then becomes cattle farming. So it's really a way to either make to, people say it's greenwashing. Yes, to an extent it is, but it's also essentially making uh, uh, the animal farming into this very niche and classist undertaking, because people say, oh, well, we have these, 5, 6, 10, 20 cows, so that's fine. But if you're saying, well, is that how the world is meant to? I mean, the argument is, are you saying that so you get to have that, maybe somebody else gets to have that, but and then what? Like, actually how does that actually become something that people can make into, whether it's a living or whether, obviously eventually these cows would be killed for made into food products. um, you're still creating a completely elitist food system. Whereas if you don't have that, you can still have large herbivores like deer and like the Highland cows and different types of large herbivores that should be roaming the forests, but they should be roaming the forests, not these enclosures. And the forests should exist, but guess what? We use so much land for farming, the forests don't exist. So what are we doing? If we keep creating farms, we're not creating the forests. So if you have the large herbivores, where is the large herbivore meant to be? And why is it that you have to exploit the large herbivore in order to actually just have the large herbivore be? If you want the large herbivores to contribute to be part of the ecosystem, then just let them be. Have forests, plant trees, have forests where it's appropriate, and where it's appropriate, the large herbivores who live there will be there. So I don't really, the argument for regenerative agriculture is really, yeah, it's as the kids say, sus.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because I mean, I can see how we allow that large herbivore to come in. I mean, in a pen, but we are not allowing the other natural animals and beings and plants and everything that would be there, like you're saying. We don't allow those, and that is not sustainable.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's no, it's this idea that we have to stick with continuing to farm animals, to continue to exploit them as part of what we do. We don't. We simply don't. I mean, humans did not evolve this way. We've only really been farming animals for about 0.001%, way, way less than 1% of the existence of hominids. So, fundamentally, we need to abandon that and move forward into a different way of living our lives. It just has to be.
Yeah, it has to be if we want to have a living planet. Yes.
Yeah, like a nice place. If we want to have a nice place, yes. If we don't want to have a nice place, then we are perfectly on track for that.
Right. Right. And so, what do you think about the youth? Now, I know you worked with youth in your past. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And are they easier to? I mean, are they more empathetic? Would you say, or what would you say are some? What
Um,
have you run into?
Well, I always I have a lot of trust and faith in humanity, for better or worse, at whatever age. I don't think change is only for the young. I think change can come from wherever. I think it's more of a matter of a person that says, I want to change. And they are willing to do so. And they're willing to take that risk, or to say, oh, how interesting. I didn't know that. Now I know this, and I'm going to try different things. And, I think you have to look for that. And there are some young people who are really keen on change, and some young people who aren't, very much like adults as well. And in terms of what I've done, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. There is a charity that friends of mine set up, and I helped them to do so. This, again, it goes back many years now. It's called Baraka Community Partnerships. And folks who've come to my supper clubs and other events that I sometimes host, all my events, all the proceeds of my events always go to Baraka Community Partnerships. I don't take anything out of the tickets that I sell to my weird and wacky events. It's primarily there's a big component of education in Baraka Community Partnerships. And I have been very fortunate to be able to run a variety of different little courses, little workshops for young folks to think through about ethics and what that looks like in their everyday life, and how to incorporate living in an ethical way, even when you're faced with difficult situations. And that's always a really interesting process, because they always come up with different solutions. Their own experiences can be different. And a lot of times, I mean, some of these kids, they have not had these kinds of conversations before. Nobody's taken the time to have these conversations with them before, for a variety of reasons, necessity generally, or need, I should say, not necessity, but need. And and it's always a really good thing to do. And again, paring things back to a very accessible point, so that you can appeal and make it easy for everybody to understand.
Yeah, ethics are so important in our society today. I mean, the ethics of as it is applicable to Mother Earth. I mean, our way
Yeah.
of our way of honoring her, and I think that's been very lost. And I mean, the more that we are on online, and not, and there's so many people that don't even go outside at all, are just totally disconnected from nature. And so what a beautiful thing it is for you to be so connected to nature and be bringing people back to that.
Yeah, actually, that's a really, you totally got it. One of the things that we always try to do, with also through Birchfield, is to, whenever we have people there or talking about rewilding, and I think you definitely heard this when I was talking at VCOP several weeks ago. We're not separate from nature. Nature is us. We are nature. And this idea that we're separate is an external force that we've co-opted, that we said, oh yeah, we're separate, even though, we live in a city, or we live in this place or that place, that we're separate from nature somehow. Or that nature is only for some people, but not others. And those are terrible. Those are terrible ideas. And we try to bridge them and say, no, nature is everywhere. But even in an urban context, nature is there. Nature is you will always see plants or animals who are living side by side with us. And the boundaries are much more porous than we like to think. And maybe there's some, to some extent, there's a bit of fear because we don't know nature anymore. So we're afraid to be out there. We're afraid of the trees. We're afraid to be out in the wilderness where there's no one else. Because we have become alienated. Like you said, we have become alienated, but it doesn't have to be that way. And that's always one of the things that we try to stress through our rewilding as well. And with having different types of people come and stay and do different projects on the land as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What kind of projects on the land do you all do?
Well, there's a variety of different things. We've had, so yesterday, in fact, I'll work my memory from the nearest to the farthest. So I remember yesterday I was having a really great conversation with a composer, a contemporary composer who is interested in coming to Birchfield and staying for a period of time so that she can compose music that addresses the anxiety, eco-anxiety that we have, and that kind of provides an outlet for that. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So I'm really hopeful that she'll come and do that. And we've had obviously painters. We've had artists who've come to paint different a variety of in different media as well. And we've had a filmmaker. And actually, it's a really fun film. It's called The Lies of Our Confines, and you can find it on YouTube. And it's a horror film, but it's not. It's a jump scare horror film. It's a tension horror film. It's a short film. It's probably about 40 minutes, I think. And it's the one of the only majority Black cast and crew for a British film, certainly for a British horror film ever made. So that I think is really important because lots of people think that being outdoors and being in nature is only for a certain type of person and not for other types of people. And that's just simply not the case. And so we've done that as well, which is really great. And we've had we've had a couple of like school groups come this past summer, which was really great. Hopefully we can do that again this year. Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, that's you make a lot of good points, and a lot of times, well, even if you're living in the city, there are trees, or you don't have to have a whole forest to connect to nature.
Totally.
Right? Simply go and see a flower and have that experience with that flower.
Yeah, and there's parks. There might be spaces that have been left sort of derelict, and then you can see there how nature is returning to those places. And there might be wild places that you didn't know about in your urban area. I was talking with a professor of ecology from Rutgers University, and she was telling me about a forest in New Jersey that I had never knew about. And I lived in New Jersey for a long time, and I went to Rutgers. And had no idea that there was this big ancient forest in New Jersey. So here we are, a really populous state, and there's an ancient forest. Who knew?
That's amazing. Yeah, you never know what's in your backyard.
Sometimes, yep, exactly.
Right. Well, y'all, if y'all have questions, please put them up here. I want to show a couple of comments. We've got Deb, and she said, I recently bought and am reading Emmy's book, Think Like a Vegan, after watching her on the Animal Rights Show, Roger Yates' YouTube channel. She is excellent. Yes.
And well, thank you so much. That's so sweet. Thank you. Really appreciate that.
And then we've got Philip here. Thanks for watching. And JJ of Vegan Knowledge.
Hey.
And then Ellen, who is she's teaching plant nutrition. So, and then we've got a comment from Mark. Thank you for this interview. Emilia Leese is a great
Oh,
soul. I'm
that,
eternally grateful to people like her, people who are not focused on their own lives, but rather on making a better world. That's
that's
beautiful.
really kind. Those are all really kind words. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's very true. I mean, we need people taking care of our earth now. And so I have a question now. When we use pesticides, and how long does it take? Do you know? I mean, for the earth to Mother Earth to recover from these things that are poisoning her, or do you have any examples of, you know, like how fast the earth can come back if we just leave her alone? Not necessarily.
It just all depends. It all depends on where it is. It depends on what state it's in. But I mean, if you think about the adaptations that can happen when you're not there, like, I mean, I can tell you from Birchfield, but it's difficult to picture because you don't know what I'm talking about. But for example, we started to restore the peat bog, which is this area that should be very sort of lots of mosses and wet and everything like that. And we started to restore that. And within just several months, we just had tons and tons and tons more of insects, dragonflies, damselflies, and then like different newts and frogs and all sorts of it was incredible. But that's up in Scotland. But if you think about places like uh, the nuclear disaster in oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't remember the
Chernobyl?
name. Chernobyl, thank you. And I mean, if you think about the adaptations there, once sort of we retreated from that as humans, we retreated from that because obviously we couldn't be in that space. What has happened there is remarkable because obviously there's adaptations that are not necessarily the best, but there's also adaptations that have surprised people. So nature can recover if we leave things well enough alone. And if nature can recover, if ecosystems can recover and adapt, and Chernobyl, they can adapt and recover in many other places as well.
Well, yeah, that's very powerful to be able to see that environment coming back to life.
Yeah, yeah, without too much of our own intervention. I mean,
Right.
but
Well, how do you ground yourself on a day to day basis, Emmy?
you have no idea. Every day is a new day. I don't know. Every day is a new day. No, yeah, I don't know. I just, I try to live as best I can every day, and try to take each day and make sure that I keep going. Not keep going is not an option. So you just keep going.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, you're again back to the mindfulness, living mindfully and doing the best that you can for the environment and for our planet and the world. I mean, which is the planet, but for all human beings and all
Yeah,
living beings.
yeah.
Right. And what is Roger? I mean, so Roger and you work together with the rewilding project. Is there other projects that y'all are working on as well?
No, that's the principal one that we work on together. He's got loads of his own other interests and projects that he works on. Um, but in terms of what we share, it's definitely it's Birchfield. Although he is often sort of when I'm writing something, and when I always pass it over to him, and I'm like, hey, when it's finished, I'm like, okay, read it and give me some comments. And so he will often challenge me on certain points and make it better and say, oh well, this argument, how it like this, I don't understand this or that. So that's, he's super helpful in that way. And I mean, obviously, and I help him in that way, like thinking through things, in terms of his own different projects that he's working on. But in terms of Birchfield, yeah, that's definitely something that we talk about. Probably if it's an off day, it'll be once a day. But usually, like, there'll be a variety of different things that we discuss regarding that in some way, shape, or form.
Right. Well, that's wonderful to have someone like that. I mean,
Very fortunate.
my gosh, yes,
Absolutely.
amazing.
Totally.
So, um, now I forgot what I was going to ask you, but well, you have so much going on. What's the next project, or what do you see happening in the next 10 years?
Wow. Yeah. I have no idea. Um, in the next 10 years, I don't know. I mean, in some way, I would like to turn Think Like a Vegan into an illustrated children's book. Um, but that kind of writing is so alien to me, and I'm trying to learn it. Um, and so that's a little bit of a side project that I have. And yeah, I would like to see, more things happening at Birchfield. Um, different sorts of things, and a little bit more progress in terms of trees. And yeah, I think that's about as much as I can plan. I'm not a big planner in terms of big future stuff.
Right. Well, at Birchfield, how many volunteers, or how does that? Do you need people? How does that work?
Some we don't have we don't have a sort of a volunteer program, but people get in touch with us sometimes and they say, "Hey, I'd really like to do X, Y, or Z," and that's great. But we work with a variety of different partners who are on the project with us. We like the Lifescape Project, ACOM. Um, uh, uh, University of Cumbria and Nottingham Trent University. We work with them, and they've got lots of different projects that they want to carry out. So often they will come onto the site and with their own people and do different things. And we always collaborate in terms of like deciding what kinds of things we're going to do and how that's going to play out and how that's going to get made or done. So that's really how we work. But again, it's not very sort of rigidly organized. Even though we are organized in the sense that we talk regularly, at least once a month we have a big call and we're all on the call and we're all talking to one another, and there's obviously the WhatsApp group and then things like that, but it's not like a rigid organized thing. It's much more flexible than that, and that's good for us because then we can do a variety. If somebody has an idea, they're like, "Hey, I want to test out this idea that I got from my ecology class and I want to do this this way to test it," then we're able to do it, which is great.
Well, that's amazing. And it sounds, I mean, did you study this in school at all? Anything about
No. No, I have learned everything on the go. No, a lot of times I'm like, I don't know, sciencey things. They're like, talking about. But I've learned a ton over this time. I have learned a ton. I have, the people that we collaborate with, they are so fantastic, and they share so much of their knowledge that I feel like I'm always in school in a
yeah,
good
so
way.
in a good, yeah, I know what you mean. So that gives everyone hope here. You don't have to have a degree in ecology or
No,
biology to take on a project like this and make a big difference. Um,
no, you just have to be a little, I don't know, kind of go for it.
yeah, open to grow, find some mentors, get out there and, see who's doing this. I mean, where should people look if they're in their town, if they want to rewild? I mean, what organizations should they look for, or how would they go about it?
That's a really good question as well. I would say try to see if there's any wild spaces already. try to see if there's any local community gardens. Try to see, depending on where you live, if there are areas that were traditionally used for wild spaces and that sort of thing. I mean, again, I'm thinking more urban spaces and suburban spaces. So I would look for that first and see who's doing what in that space, and then follow along, and then see if you can build on that, you can participate in that, and then maybe you can find, that can lead you to think up of new things that you can do. But if you have a garden, then absolutely rewild your garden if you can do it. If you're not in an HOA kind of situation where you have to keep your grass this big, especially in the US, if you can make your garden or your outdoor space, if you just have a balcony and you can put some plants out there, do that. And if you can make your garden a bit more wild, do that. And there's loads of information about how to do that online. But also, that's like the easiest access point, I would say.
So if you have a garden, let's say you have
Yeah.
an outdoor fenced area,
Yeah.
right? And you
Yeah.
just let it go. And just let it be. Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let it be. Plant some wildflowers if you can figure out which are the appropriate wildflowers, which might have grown there originally. That would be really good. If you have trees back there and branches fall, obviously if it's a dangerous type of thing, then remove it. But if there's branches and leaves, don't rake up the leaves, don't blow the leaves away. Those leaves are really important for insects. And nature is not a tidy garden. Nature is messy. Like, think of a forest. What does a forest look like? Does a forest have no leaves? Of course it has leaves. Does a forest not have branches? Of course it has branches all over the place. You know, like, you can create tidy spaces. I mean, like, if you want a seating area and you want that to be tidy, totally get that, do that. But if you can also, like, create little, like, areas, like little wetland areas, like even with a little a very simple kind of pond that you can make with, like, a plastic tub. There's lots of tutorials online on how to do that safely and cheaply. So if you have access to that, start looking at that, because once you start looking at your own space differently, then you will start seeing more of that. Like when you buy a car and you're like, oh, I've never seen a red car before, and then you start seeing red cars everywhere, whatever that is. It's that same idea.
Well, this has been very enlightening, and I feel very inspired about letting nature rewild. And I'm trying to be very careful with my words here. Not referring to nature as
I
it's more of
know.
yeah.
I totally feel that, and sometimes, yeah, I totally get that, but it's hard because you have to put a lot more words around it. But then but it's easier to just say it like we say it. But there's a lot more to it. So I share that. I share that tension completely.
Well, thank you. I see that Nicole is here, and she's saying that she's a vegan visual artist. So thanks for joining us, and everyone else that has joined us. And I want to make sure to say to visit us at www.all-creatures.org and help support this program and others by making a one-time or reoccurring donation of any amount. We're really grateful that you've joined us, and we'd love to hear your last words and where people can reach you, Emmy.
So
Where can they
yeah,
get your book?
you can get the book. You can pre-order if you're in the U.S. You can pre-order it, which is a great way to get people's attention on the book. You can pre-order it from any bookshop online and ask your library to carry it. I've got my podcast, Think Like a Vegan. It's streaming everywhere. EmiliaLeese.com. That's my website. And I'm Emmy Leese on social media. You can find me on Instagram and Blue Sky and that sort of thing.
Wonderful. All right. Well, everyone is going to jump over there and order the book and
Great.
follow the podcast. Yes. And we're just so thankful for you to be our guest on all-creatures.org because you're really inspirational. Thank you for everything you're doing, Emmy.
Thank you for everything you're doing. It's amazing. And I really I'm so delighted to have been here. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, we're very blessed. And thanks, Philip, JJ, Ellen, Mark,
Yeah,
and
thanks
Nicole,
everybody.
and everybody else on the replay, and Deb, definitely, y'all. So y'all have a beautiful, blessed day. Bye-bye, y'all.